end of the day, but we're happy to interview you as a very recently past president. And since you're here and handy, let's talk about it. I want to talk about a whole lot of different things right now, or ask you some questions about it. But first, just give us something about your personal history, your background, maybe the law school, marriages.
Yeah.
You don't have to get into anything. Just somebody handed me this cheat sheet, and I'm reading from it.
All right.
So go right ahead.
I grew up in San Antonio. I was born in Dallas, but moved here when I was 6, and lived in the same house from age 6 to 18, over by MacArthur High School. And then my dad really wanted me to go to Texas A&M, so I went to the University of Texas. And,
well, I wound up at Texas Tech. My dad was an Aggie too.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted.
And so I went to Austin in 1981 and just refused to leave. And had an interest in law all along, and criminal law specifically toward the latter part of my college years. And got various runner jobs in Austin at different law firms, and then decided to run for a criminal law firm. And 2 lawyers named Bill White and Bill Allison hired me, and we were off to the races in the criminal law world. I started enjoying it and was curious about it. And we'll talk more about the legal stuff later. Angela and I married in 95, and we have 2 wonderful children. They're now 20 and 18. We divorced about 10 years ago, and but we're still on good terms. We talk and team up against our teenagers.
That's great.
They say that raising teenagers is part love and part guerrilla warfare. It's kind of true.
It can be that way.
They're great kids. One's in California, one's in Colorado. And Angel and I are still in Austin.
So are you skiing now?
I am not skiing. I've snow skied some, but Kathleen being in Denver, I think we're going to have to start doing that again.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Why in the world did you become a criminal defense lawyer?
Oh, I was always curious about it. You know, I like to watch TV shows. For some reason, I remember a show as a kid that impacted me called Owen Marshall, Attorney at Law. It wasn't, one of the big famous shows, but I just liked it. And then I had some distant cousins who were lawyers. Ted Butler, who was the DA here for a while, and then Mike Carnes, who is a cousin of mine, and his brother Bert, who's a judge in Williamson County. I kind of knew them a little bit from a distance, and I was always curious about it. But when I went to work for Bill White and Bill Allison, I became real interested in criminal law. And one of the first days I went to work, Bill White brought in a grocery sack like he would do, here. So what is that? He goes, that's money, you need to count it. It was about $50,000 in $20 bills. It was my first or second day of work, and I thought, I'm going to like this work. And so it was a fun time. They had good cases, and they actually tried State versus Michael Moore when I was in law school, and I got to watch it.
So how much of that did you get to see?
Front to back.
So you were there the whole way.
Yeah, and that was 86. He was charged, and 87 was the trial, and it was the first jury trial I ever saw, criminal jury trial I ever saw.
Wow.
And so I've just always enjoyed it, and I started doing some family law in recent years because a lot of the family law overlaps criminal issues, and I found it to be a real advantage to handle both. And it's kind of fun to take depositions and do discovery of a CPS worker and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been a good ride. I've enjoyed it.
Well, think a little bit, and let's talk about some of your other memorable cases or just experience as a lawyer and dealing with TCDLA. We'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah. Well, case-wise, I think probably the earliest, most intense, interesting case I had was in Alpine, Texas. I represented a grocer who owned a bunch of small grocery stores. He and his dad He was charged with sexually abusing his children. And he had a lawyer out of El Paso, and Angela, my wife, knew him, and she got to talking to him and said, this lawyer in El Paso was giving him some advice that I thought was unusual, and I just commented on that. So he came and saw me and interviewed me, and ended up hiring me to represent him in that case. And I made 16 trips to Alpine, Texas on that case, 2 trials. And the first one, I talked the DA into a bench trial because the judge had also been presiding over the family law proceedings and was kind of leaning my guy's way, but the DA wasn't privy to that. So, but anyway, he agreed to a bench trial, and the judge found him not guilty. But after he was found not guilty, he was arrested in the courtroom on a new charge. So he was acquitted, hugging me, and then he was put in handcuffs and hauled over to the jail on a new charge. And we had a jury trial 6 months later, and he was found not guilty again. And so I realized, even at my young age, so this probably is never going to happen again. 2 not guilty verdicts on 2 child sex abuse cases, but they were pretty bogus cases with a lot of small town politics involved.
Yeah. Got some others in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I represent, by virtue of my association with Roy, we represented a lot of politicians, but especially back when the DA's office in Travis County had almost exclusive jurisdiction. We tried a state rep for perjury, Keno Flores.
Tell us a little bit about that, not the whole deal, but just what was that about?
Oh, Keno was charged with not reporting financial contributions, not reporting financial assets in the way required under the Ethics Commission rules, and tampering with the record, and then swearing to the documents as the perjury count. You know, he was a very notorious in South Texas representative, and he had a lot of other things he was investigated for. So we always felt like this was kind of like the Al Capone thing, where they can get him on the tax return, but they couldn't get him on some other stuff. And so they were laying in wait to if we'd gone to the jury for sentencing, they were laying in wait to prove up all these other things. But we decided to go to the judge for sentencing. The judge gave him probation. That was interesting because he was a Democrat, and it was at the time Tom DeLay was being prosecuted and investigated, and I always felt like we would have gotten a misdemeanor out of the DA, but for she had to look like she was balanced, prosecuting Republicans and Democrats, and so that was the big political trial I tried, and that was Roy Minton, and other people we've represented in investigations, speakers of the House, other state reps. That was pretty interesting stuff because you had that political overlay. It's pretty interesting.
So you did a lot of those. So.
Yeah, and then some staffers that got in trouble. Most recent interesting case was an intox manslaughter that we tried in Travis County. We represented a girl who was very well off, and she struck a pedestrian in West Austin and killed the pedestrian. She was acquitted of everything except criminal negligent homicide, and the jury gave her probation. And, Austin was very upset about that whole case and about the result. And it was kind of an example of some media-driven hysteria because the facts of the case, I thought, justified the verdict. And she was an easy target because she's from a very wealthy family. And her dad was actually a California state rep at one time and had a hit-and-run thing on his record. So the media just had a field day with all that stuff. But she's doing real well on probation.
What changes have you observed in the criminal defense arena from these beginning days that you've told us about to where we are now, and the judiciary that we are confronted with, those kinds of things?
Well, I started after you, but I started in the late 80s, and I think changes in criminal defense would be, advertising was kind of just starting in the 80s. There were some decisions that came out that said that lawyers could advertise. And I think I would say, particularly in the last 10 to 15 years, the marketing and the the communication ability that lawyers have to advertise and get the word out has multiplied tenfold. Twitter and Facebook and online ads and websites, and for years it was the yellow pages and all that, but you see kind of a mass media type approach a lot of lawyers have, and young lawyers will get started often without any kind of mentor or anybody to bounce things off, and I see a lot of young lawyers with cases, and I'm concerned they may not be equipped to handle the case. They can get the cases because of the hyped up advertising or contacts, but it sometimes, I think, lends itself to kind of a mill type practice. That's one thing I'd say. And you mentioned the judiciary. I really have admiration for judges for the most part, and I think they have a hard job. I think it's they're so much more sensitive, hypersensitive to publicity cases. They're always looking over their shoulder because they're going to be criticized, and the victims in crimes play a larger and larger role in the decision making. I remember starting out, there were prosecutors and judges who would say, well, I know they want pen time, but I'm not going to give pen time. I think that's more rare these days. It's more difficult for judges to fade the heat of the victims and the victims' rights groups.
Why do you think that is?
Oh, I think we have a media now that's very reactive, and there's so many sources of media. I mean, growing up, I had 3 or 4 TV stations, maybe, and if the antenna were working right, and the foil on the antenna were working right. But now, you have hundreds of outlets, and they're competing for people's attention. The sensationalism draws people in, and I think like reality TV or these outrageous shows of these horrific things, like the cable shows that show horrible accidents. It's like you have to shock people to get them to watch your station, and I think that's affected reporting in the legal media, and stirring up the community to be angry about something is kind of a necessity in the media world to draw in viewership. I think that drives a lot of it.
What about the federal courts?
The federal courts, I would argue, at least in Austin and the ones I practice in,
Yes,
they're a little more static, and it's a little more of an exclusive club. I practiced briefly. I practiced in front of Jim Allen in Austin, Roberts in Waco, Sparks has been there forever in Austin, and now Lee Yackel in Austin. I guess what I would say is the federal system seems somewhat more immune to some of those forces of sensationalism in the media, but at the same time, when I started practicing, the sentencing guidelines had just come out, and Mastretta had just come out saying, or whatever the case was, it says you can forfeit attorney's fees if they were from ill-gotten gains, that said you couldn't take cash fees, that cash fees were subject to review and forfeiture. So I think the sentencing guidelines have created, I guess, what they were meant to, somewhat of a uniformity in sentencing. But and I think it was extremely counterproductive for many years when judges were afraid to vary from the guidelines, and there were very limited circumstances in which they could vary. And I think in the last 5 to 8 years, with some of the decisions saying the sentencing guidelines are advisory, it's good to see some judges are a little more able to vary from the guidelines. And so
we're not that blessed in Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Yeah, well,
They rarely. Here, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be inserting,
Yeah.
inserting my opinion to this. I'm asking you. But
well, Judge Yackel is not afraid to vary. Judge Sparks is a lot more reluctant to. And I had a case actually in Illinois where a judge lopped a couple of years off. So I think it depends on the judges. I mean, I know that the federal judges in the Northern District are quite different from the federal judges in the Western District. And very limited experience with the Southern District, so, and none with the Eastern District. So most of my federal experience is Western District. So.
And what about your experiences with TCDLA? And,
Oh,
I mean, not currently, but from the outset and things that you recall,
Right.
been involved in, or you've been involved in.
Well, I got a scholarship, as you probably remember, to be a law student scholarship when I was working for Bill White and Bill Allison, because they would come to some of the seminars and ask me to go. And I came here as a law student to a seminar. I came to TCLA seminar as a law student, saw Cat Bennett speak, and I saw Charlie Butt speak. And he gave me $1,000 check, and I thought I'd never need any more money the rest of my life. I mean, it was $1,000 paid a year's tuition back then.
Who gave you $1,000?
Charlie Butt.
Charlie Butt?
For the scholarship, the
Yeah,
TCLA scholarship.
for that scholarship.
Yeah. And then I remember it was in New Orleans, and you and Bob Jones and Jack Zimmerman and John Boston took me touring around Bourbon Street. And then I met up with some of the younger people at the seminar, and we stayed up until all hours of the night. I think I slept the whole next day. But it was a good experience, a good indoctrination into TCLA. And as I started my young family, I kind of distanced myself a little bit when they were babies, but because I didn't feel like I had the time to devote. But about 15 or 20 years ago, I plugged back in. It's been probably the single most important instrumental force in my criminal defense career in terms of getting to know people, getting the support I need, learning, and being a much better lawyer. Because you hear other lawyers talk about what they do, and you steal from them, and you hopefully can pass it on to others later in life, which I'm trying to do now.
Great.
Yeah.
Where are we?